Well, a group of congressmen led by Democratic Virginia Representative Donald McEachin have created a task force aimed at fighting what they see as economic injustice. Standing outside the U.S. Capitol late last week, the lawmakers were joined by leaders of environmental groups, including Green for All and Green Latinos, as they announced the United for Climate and Environmental Justice Task Force. They timed that announcement for just 2 days before tens of thousands marched on the White House in Washington and in smaller events all around the country in what was billed as the People's Climate March. McEachin says rural, low-income, and communities of color are hurt more by environmental issues than are others. The lawmakers pointing to things like oil refineries, like this one in Torrance, California, and in other communities in the state, including Wilmington and Carson, saying they face unhealthy exposures to waste and pollution. All this as President Trump signs an executive order rolling back some restrictions on offshore oil and natural gas drilling, saying allowing it in parts of the Atlantic and Pacific and off the Alaskan coast will create thousands of well-paying jobs. Joining us now in our Washington, D.C. studios to talk about it, Democratic Virginia Rep. Donald McEachin, co-chair of the United Climate and Environmental Task Force. And in full disclosure, my fraternity brother.
It's Kappa Day on the Hill. Good to see you soon.
Kappa Day on the Hill?
Yes,
all right.
yes,
we like that a lot. All right. First of all, let's talk about this. You went on the floor of the House, was it last night?
Last week.
Last week to talk about how important this was to you. How'd you get involved with this? You're a new congressman. What perked you up with this?
Well, it's born out of experience. You know, I'm also a former Virginia legislator. We've had to deal with these issues in Virginia. We found some kindred spirits in our freshman class with Congresswoman Jayapal and Congresswoman Barragan, and we thought it important that our voices be raised on this issue. You know, there are lots of things going on in the environmental space, a lot of important things. Climate change, we want to make sure we deal with rising sea levels. But as we have that conversation, we want to make sure that the disproportionate effect on low-income folks and minorities is also heard.
You know, this has been documented for many years, what people have called environmental racism, that if you live in the poor side of town, you're much more likely to get the nuclear plant, the trash dump, etc. What has been the toughest thing about getting traction on that?
The toughest thing is that we're not in the room, Derek. You know, as African Americans, as people of color, we don't tend to be in the room, whether it's being part of environmental groups who are trying to push for change, or whether it's actually going to the public hearings to push back against these changes. And we as a community need to be more involved. And I hope that part of what we do with this new task force is raise the awareness, not only of the Congress, but of our constituencies as well.
When you talk about those separate constituencies and poverty and being disconnected from the big cities as a part of that issue, if you're worried about whether or not you're going to have a decent job or whether or not you can pay your mortgage and these kinds of things, there's not a lot of room left in there for going to meetings and showing up at protests.
Absolutely, and that is a fact, but it's a fact that we have to overcome, because if you can't breathe, you're not going to be able to pay your bills, you're not going to be able to go to work. So, I mean, you know, the incidence of asthma are much higher in the African American community than they are in the majority community. So we have to expand our awareness to say, you know what, this is part of what good citizenship looks like. Yes, I've got to go to work. Yes, I've got to put food on my table. Yes, I got to make sure the kids do homework. But yes, I have to make sure that my environment is clean, that I don't live in a Flint, Michigan situation.
Now, Flint happened before President Trump got in office. Do you have evidence that what he's trying to do is likely to make the situation worse?
Well, it's certainly not going to make the situation better. And indeed, in rolling back many of the EPA protections and hiring a guy like Scott Pruitt, who sued the EPA 15 or 16 times, he doesn't seem to be someone who's enamored with the notion of Mother Earth and trying to protect it. So the situation is not good to begin with, and he is certainly going to make it worse.
He's going to make the argument that there's jobs at stake, that there's too much regulation, and this is killing jobs that the folks in the communities you're talking about could use.
But if we went to a green economy, there would be jobs. We need, in my district, we need to be building solar panels. We need to be building wind turbines. You talk about bringing manufacturing jobs back. You know, the president has sold America a bill of goods on the notion that he's going to bring coal jobs back or other manufacturing jobs back. But if we went to a green economy, we could really bring manufacturing jobs back to America.
When you speak about your district, is this something that's in the front of the minds of your constituents as you talk to them?
You know, my district is like everyone else's, and it's just like you said, Derek. It's part, you know, they're worried about education, which is something to worry about. They're worried about jobs. Environment certainly is in there, and it falls down the line. But part of being a representative is being a leader. And to that extent, I hope that my advocacy will raise their awareness as well.
All right, if you could get things to begin to turn around in the direction you'd like to see them go, what would happen, and how will you push for that to happen?
Well, if I could wave a magic wand, we'd stay in the Paris Accords. We would not have offshore drilling. We would have a more activist citizenry when it comes to the communities they live in and pushing back against zoning changes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, now, given the realities of the administration you have and the Republican Congress, what do you think you can get done? Well,
you know, we'll raise our voices. And you can see how raised voices have already impacted this administration, whether it's the health care bill, whether it's the budget compromise. So, you know, never forget that politics is a contact sport, and as long as our constituents stay in contact with us, change can happen.
All right, Representative Don McEachin, Virginia Democrat, and my fraternity brother, it's always so good to chat with you. Good to see you. Congratulations again on the race last fall. I want to turn back to the panel and talk about this issue of environmental racism and how it can be impacted by folks working inside and outside the system.
Yeah, and you know, I think the congressman is just so right about this false choice that's been set up. There's a false narrative, right? It's either the economy or it's our environment. And in reality, you can have both. There's so many green jobs. My father has been a blue-collar worker for 30 years. We could easily convert someone like that over to a green economy. We've got to be smarter about that, and we've got to stop making our people make false choices.
And I definitely think this is an issue, like you said, is beyond politics. You know, definitely some concerning actions on the presidential level as far as rolling back some EPA stuff. But here in Maryland, we have a Republican governor who recently banned fracking. And so there are some Republicans who are making efforts to recognize that, you know, it's not so much maybe not, you know, intentional, but the idea that factories look for low property places to set up shop, and that's unfortunately where a lot of black homes and a lot of black people have to live. And so I had to reconcile that, you know, difference and understand that there is impact on these environmental concerns.
Yeah, and the Hip Hop Justice Organization is really doing a lot of work in this space. In fact, the person in charge of environmental justice at the EPA, who was fired with the Trump administration, now has been rehoused at the Hip Hop Caucus. And so I'm happy to see that there are some black organizations that have really put their arms around this issue of environmental justice and are really moving forward very aggressively.
You know, I had thought that as the federal government pulls back, and you mentioned what the state of Maryland is doing, could we end up with a patchwork situation where some states are more progressive on this, trying to protect their citizens, other states less so?
We're in danger of that, and that's not a good thing. You know, whether you live in California, Virginia, Michigan, or Florida, you ought to be entitled to clean air, clean water, and a clean land. So that's why it's so important that folks stay involved at the federal level and keep pushing.
A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. Your hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not going to let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally.
What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.